Our reading is from Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. The parable of the bags of gold. This is Jesus speaking. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the man with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Abby, and I will be giving this morning's message. I struggled with this passage, mostly because of those last little 4 words, weeping and gnashing of teeth. Last time I had torture, the time before that I had weeping and gnashing of teeth again. I don't know what God's doing. Why? These verses keep ending up in my lap. So there we go. But for some people who have spent a lot of time in church, this parable might be quite familiar. It's definitely one that I've heard many times, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room have heard it many times as well. But I think it has the possibility of being one of the most misunderstood parables. I think everyone runs the risk of getting this one a little bit wrong. It's a parable of gold coins, a parable of talents, as it's otherwise known. 2 servants are given money, they double it, and it pleases their master. But one servant who buries the money, returns the same amount, is cast away. Some people might think that we're given gifts, given talents from God, and that we're supposed to use those gifts and talents on earth, and God will reward us in heaven. But if we don't, we're cast away into the weeping and gnashing of teeth. If we don't use our gifts and talents, then we'll be punished. Dare we use the word hell? No, that is not what this parable is for, and that's not the gospel. And the word talent here, I think, is the cause for confusion, which is why the reading this morning was the bags of gold. But the gospel is to believe in Jesus and you will be saved. Receive grace, the grace of God through faith in Christ, and you will be saved. Not use your talents in life and you'll be saved. Using your talents will not save you. Using the gifts God has given you will not be the reason you're saved. And maybe I'm just going to say this in case it needs to be said this morning. Nothing you will ever do will earn you God's love. There is nothing you can physically do to earn God's love or his forgiveness or his grace. It is not an exam. It's not a savings account. It's not a destination that you need to reach. Faith in Jesus is made by making a choice in your heart. And by making that choice to accept Jesus, that he died for you on that cross, that he took the punishment for every bad thing that you've ever done and you ever will do, and through faith and belief in him, you will receive an eternal forgiveness, an eternal grace, and an eternal freedom. You cannot earn God's love. You cannot buy God's love. It is freely given. All you need to do is accept it. And if that's something that you want to do today, if you want to talk about eternal forgiveness, eternal grace, eternal freedom, if you want to accept Jesus as your Savior in your heart and your life today, please come talk to me or come to talk to Thea after the service. Because right now we need to talk about the parable. Because the parable of the talents, the parable of the bags of gold, is really about faith. You're freely given hope, grace, and freedom found in Jesus. Your faith and what you do with it, and why you do what you do with it. Today I want to talk about motivation. Because maybe the lessons we can all take away from this parable comes from each of the servants and their motivations. First, when we hear the word talent, we think of special ability, which is a musical talent, but that is an English word. And in Jesus' day, a talent was a measure of weight, which was then kind of moved on into a measure of money. And it's got nothing to do with abilities. This parable, today we use gold coins. Sometimes it's known as the parable of investment. I want to look at the language used. So in verses 16 compared to verses 18. So 16, at once he who received the 5 talents went. Now in some translations it uses the word immediately. And there's a sense of excitement and enthusiasm here. He's excited to be trusted with such great treasure, to do something positive, to prove himself. He puts his 5 talents or bags of gold to work, and he gains 5 more. In verse 18 it says, but he who received the 1 went away and dug in the earth and hid his Lord's money. The 1-talent servant digs a hole and buries his master's money. And at the time, it was actually an accepted way of safeguarding money. According to rabbinical, is that how we say it? Rabbinical law, the person who buries money in a hidden location cannot be held accountable for its loss. So it's a pretty conservative way of safekeeping, but it accomplishes nothing. The words used for the 5 and 2-talent servants are really progressive. Went off at once, put the money to work, they gained. Whereas the words used for the 1-talent servant are kind of regressive. It just went off, dug in the earth, hid. The difference reflects contrasting opinions, contrasting ways that they viewed their master, and therefore what motivates their actions. The master's trust emboldens the 5 and 2-talent servants who realize that the master has given them a chance to make something of themselves, to do good, to accomplish, to earn a promotion, and to please the master. And their trust in the master reflects the trust that the master has shown in them. But verses 24 and 25, we see the 1-talent servant has a very different view of this master. The 1-talent servant addresses the master in an apologetic and somewhat defensive tone, making it clear that he understands he's failed. And he hopes he can escape punishment by explaining. He says he knew the master to be a harsh man, reaping where he did not sow. But I don't know about you, but that that surprises me as a reader and as a person hearing this, because this is the first time we hear about that characterization. So far, everything we've seen of the master has been generous. So generous. He entrusts his servants with a fortune and left them no notable instructions, just a massive scope of possibility. And he praised and rewarded the first two servants. I wonder why the one-talent servant feels that the master is harsh, and why that harshness wasn't obvious earlier in the reading. Unless, of course, the characteristic is just untrue. Maybe he's making that stuff or projecting onto the master that his own fear. Because verse 25 says, I was afraid. The single-talent servant, the servant who buried his one bag of gold coins, let fear motivate him. And fear tends to be a disabler rather than an enabler. It feels like a really foreign characteristic as well to associate, because Jesus says throughout the Gospels, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And of course, we all have fears, but belief in Jesus can help us to overcome those fears. The greater our faith, the less our fear. The master gave each of the three servants a great treasure and a wonderful opportunity. The first two servants put their money to work and doubled it. And while they made the best of their opportunity, they also took a risk. They could not have acted so boldly if they did not trust the master. If they had believed the master would punish them for every mistake, they would not have felt free enough to do what they did. They acted with confidence, not just in themselves, but in their master. And the one-talent servant acted in fear, and he didn't trust the master's generosity, and it was fearful, and he limits himself. He buried the money, assuming that that would protect him from criticism. And after all, the rabbis at the time said that burying the money ends one's responsibility, but he paid the price. Now, some of you might be a bit confused, because just a few minutes ago I said you cannot earn God's love. Nothing that you do will earn you salvation, and that is true. But then here we have a man who does nothing and then gets cast out, so the weeping and gnashing of teeth. But please, please understand the difference, because with grace and salvation comes freedom. Many other things, but especially to this point, freedom. The servant who buried his talents, who buried his coins, he was not free. He was given an opportunity for faith, but he was ruled by fear of the master, a fear that he was projecting, a fear that the other servants did not have. He did not know his master. He did not trust his master. He acted out of fear, and he spent the whole time his master was on his long trip with his gifts and his talents and his bags of gold buried in the ground. They did not affect him at all. They did not affect his life at all. And that is the big difference. So I'm going to ask you a question. What motivates your faith? Are you someone who sees your faith as a gift to share, explore, grow, multiply, to inspire? Do you see it as something that's exciting? Something that is a blessing from God, from an ever-loving and trusting and generous Father? Or are you someone who looks at God out of fear of judgment or other scary stuff he may be projecting and manifesting? Some people can get a bit bogged down by the law and harshness, and I'll admit there are some pretty scary bits in the Old Testament that aren't easy to talk about. The Bible can sometimes look a bit black and white. And this parable can look a bit black and white. Do the right thing or be judged. Do the correct thing, follow the law, or be judged. And I'm sure we all know non-Christians in our lives who look to Jesus like the one-talent servant looked at the master, as someone who's harsh, as someone whose legacy is returning for the purpose of judgment. And they don't want to worship a God like that. kind of understand why this parable doesn't make it into the welcome leaflets. So I'll ask again, what motivates your faith? How do you see God, and how does that motivate your faith? What do you do with your faith, and why do you do what you do with your faith? The 5-talent and 2-talent servants knew their master as someone who was generous. They took their bags of gold and multiplied them because of their faith in him. Is that you? Is that us as a church? I find a lot of joy in that knowledge. Those who knew the master and enjoyed his gifts were the ones who saw good things gained because of it. And I really hope that us as I hope that we can see that in ourselves, in us as a church, because I see joy every month at Messy Church. I see joy on people's faces on Sunday mornings as we sing. I see joy in the friendly, no questions asked conversations. I see joy in talking to Steve earlier because I ran into somebody that we helped a job of a couple of years ago, and he's got this job that he loves, and it's wonderful. We sang earlier, there is joy in the house of the Lord. So I believe that as a church, we know that God is a good God, one who has blessed us. And I believe that we carry that blessing with us, and we can see the good things growing and multiplying. And if you, on a slightly different note, when reading this parable, some people could get bogged down by the details of numbers, 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent. The first servant must have had loads of faith to be entrusted with 5 talents, 5 bags of gold from his master, and maybe the 1 talent servant was a bit of a 1 talent servant for a reason. But numbers don't matter. Jesus consistently says throughout the Gospels that faith, no matter how small, no matter how it's obtained, faith is the important thing. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. That's John 6:29. And Jesus answered them, have faith in God. Truly, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt it in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. That's Mark 11:22. Faith is the greatest thing, and by faith, that great things can be done. And it genuinely doesn't matter how you view yourself as a 1, 2, or 5 bag of gold person. God sees you for who you are and offers you so much by having faith in him. In a moment, we're going to read the creed, and it's a declaration of faith. So let's say this as individuals who take accountability for our personal faith. And then let's say this together as a church family who know how good our God